This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you that are here with us. Olive Tree Fellowship here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we also want to welcome those that are joining us on our YouTube and Facebook platforms, that we could go to you wherever you're at from here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome. Today we are presenting a program on Hanukkah, and we are getting ready for Hanukkah 2021. And this is going to be a very special Hanukkah this year because of what is going on globally, not just in our nation, not just in our city, but what is happening globally throughout the world. And so what we're going to be looking at today is, what is Hanukkah? What is Hanukkah? And so we all have different understandings of what Hanukkah is. We have different people looking at different things on Hanukkah. And what is Hanukkah from a biblical perspective? And again, we are going to be looking at these. There we go. What is Hanukkah? So when we think of Hanukkah, most people think of what is called the Jewish traditional Hanukkah, and the latkes, the Hanukkah, and all kinds of dreidels, all kinds of foods and things like that. Now, these are the dates of Hanukkah in the Gregorian calendar. Again, in 2016, it was December 25th. Now in 2021, it's November 29th. The Jewish calendar, in the Jewish calendar, it is what's called Kislev 25, and it'll always be on the same Kislev 25 in the Jewish and also the biblical calendar, although Hanukkah, as we're going to see, is not a biblical feast of Yahweh, but it is a Jewish celebration. Now, is Hanukkah the Jewish Christmas? Because as you saw here in the Gregorian calendar, it always falls around December 25th, December 13th, and the 11th. And you have all these different dates very close to the secular or the religious and the Catholic and or secular Christmas season, so-called. And so many people kind of look at, even many Jewish people look at Hanukkah as a Jewish Christmas. They have a Hanukkah bush instead of a Christmas tree. There's a Hanukkah little balls, Hanukkah foods. They even have a Hanukkah Harry. Instead of Santa Claus, his name is Hanukkah Harry. And so the gelt up there, the monies, and so the Hanukkah. So Hanukkah traditionally is very much like the Catholic Christian Christmas. But the question is it? Or is it something more sinister? Is it something not just a nice little party time, but does it have to do with something more sinister? And it is, again, my thesis that it is something more sinister. And in this presentation, we are going to uncover what I call the true meanings, and again, plural, the true meanings of Hanukkah, not the common, the unhistoric, the untrue understanding that has developed and known as the holiday of Hanukkah. To many people, Hanukkah is a holiday. Happy Hanukkah. You probably heard that sign, Happy Hanukkah. And it's become popular in the world, but most of what people follow traditionally and commonly as Hanukkah is, I don't want to call it lies, I don't want to call it, but they never occurred, as we're going to see in our program. Now, the real name of this teaching is The Secrets of Hanukkah and the Coming Anti-Messiah. The Secrets of Hanukkah and the Coming Anti-Messiah, or what I like to call Raising Up a Maccabee Generation. Since I was a young man, since I was a little boy, a young man, I've been following Adonai, and I've been studying this, and I have this passion to build up a Maccabee generation, a generation of Maccabees, and again, especially those of you that are young men. I really believe that studying Hanukkah for the young men and the young ladies of our congregation is of vital importance, because a martyr generation is coming. A martyr generation is coming. And we need to prepare a generation that will be Maccabees, that will be young men and young women that will stand up to what's coming, stand up and be able to spiritually fight against the forces that are coming. Number one, by staying close to Adonai, by studying His Word, by being pure and holy, and by being able to teach others and bring people into the biblical Hebraic faith. And by understanding Torah, and bringing Torah to the world today, we could raise up that Maccabee generation. I've always looked at myself as a Maccabee, and as one of my ancestors was Simon Maccabeus, and I've always thought of that, and this idea that I want to pass on to you, a Maccabee generation. There was a movie that I believe was filmed in Vegas. What was the name of that movie? And about the Russians landing in Red Dawn. And if you remember that one of the things that I guess the high school was named the Wolverines, and they started putting Wolverines everywhere, and they were all Wolverines. Well, we want to be Maccabees, because there is a Red Dawn coming. And it's not just going to be Russia, China, it's going to be the anti-Messiah. And we don't need to raise up some Wolverines, we want to raise up some Maccabees, and a Maccabee generation for the martyr generation that is coming. And this is not meant to put fear into you. This is not meant to scare. I don't want to make this a scare tactic. But one of the most important things that we always need to do is be prepared. Be prepared. If we're not prepared, if you're not prepared for a flat tire, You know, every one of you carries a spare tire, you carry a jack, you carry some basic tools, and that's preparation. And yes, we believe in faith. I have faith, but I also believe in being prepared. So I will put a spare tire in my car and a jack in case it happens. So I want to prepare not just this congregation, but those that are listening. I want to prepare the Christian community, because the Christian community has, in a sense, looked at Hanukkah, because they are wrapped up in Christmas, and have, in a sense, regulated Hanukkah for the Jews. Christmas is for us, Hanukkah is for the Jews. And by doing that, we are not studying the most important aspects of Hanukkah, and as we're going to see, that deal with almost every aspect of our life, from biblical times, the time of Daniel, to the end of the world. And the end of the world will come. The last days will come, as we're going to see. Hanukkah today, again, is the celebration of rededication. Today, it's a celebration of rededication after defilement. It's a celebration of victory over the enemies of our faith. Like Purim, Hanukkah is also a celebration of victory over our enemies of our faith. Hanukkah, more importantly, is also, especially within Christianity, but also in Judaism. Even in Judaism, and definitely in the Messianic world many times, it's a missed treasure trove. I call it a missed treasure trove of important lessons for properly understanding Scripture, especially for believers in Messiah. Again, if you're a believer in Messiah, not just Messianic, but you're a Baptist, a Lutheran, you go to Calvary or Vineyard or all these congregations. There's so many lessons in Hanukkah for the believer, Christian, Messianic, even for Jewish people. Many Jewish people don't know these things. And of course, in this series, we're going to explain what I call the secret significance of Hanukkah. There are secrets to Hanukkah as the key understanding to recognizing who the anti-Messiah is going to be. Who is the anti-Messiah? So prepare yourself for this radical revolution that reveals, and we're going to go back to really the beginning. This teaching, by the way, I developed it back in the early 2000s, but in 2013, I presented this at the Michael Rood Hanukkah conference in 2013, and if anyone would like to get this from the Michael Rood, it's available on Michael Rood's platform, and you could actually get the CD of this program, for the DVD, correct, of this program. The end is near. Have you ever seen those people with signs? The end is near, or the end is here. And sometimes they would put them in what they call sandwich boards and go around town. The end is near, the end is near. But I do want to announce that we're not in the last days. I definitely want to make sure that everybody understands we are not in the last days. Can you say we are not in the last days?
Not in the last days.
We are in the last hours. And so, if not maybe the last minutes, I don't know how close we are, but things are getting hot, and things are going throughout the world globally. The anti-Messiah, or what really should be called the beast system, is being implemented globally before our very eyes but the body of Messiah is asleep. People are asleep. They don't realize that what's happening, not just in our nation. When we see what's going on in our country, it's not just our country. It's every country in the world. And remember, the beast system is not for America. The beast system is not for England. It's not for Australia. It's not for the African nations or Asian nations. The beast system is a worldwide system that really began as we studied in our production of Blueprint for the Last Days. It's started with Nimrod. He was the first potentate. He was the first, what we would call anti-Messiah, or the first beast. And from then, it's gone along. And so we really need to look at this. The anti-Messiah. There I am as a little boy with my grandma. And my brother's back there, and my cousin Molly's back there, and this is me, and we used to call her Grandma Mita, and there I am walking across the street at the corner, at the corner of Isleta and Arenal Road, and Gough Street goes up of that. I'm walking about, I would say, not even half a mile from where I live. And we were walking across the street. We had just been to church. It was probably about this time of the year, because it was a full moon night, and we had just been to church. And I know it was about this time of the year because in the corner lot used to be a cornfield, and the corn stalks were still up and getting old there and falling down. And we had just been to church. There's an Allsups there at the corner, and today it used to be Old St. Anne's Church, an old mission church. And we had just been to church, and as we were going home, we were crossing the street. I don't know. I must have been. What do I look like there? About 9 or 10. I must have been about 9 or 10. I had hair then, and I asked my grandma. And it must have been because we were at church. There was some, what we call misioneros, missionaries that had come, and they must have been talking from the book of Revelation. I don't remember what they talked about, but I do remember after church, crossing the street there, walking home. It was me, my mom, my brother Tony, my grandma, Molly and her mom, and we were walking home, and I asked my grandma this question: ¿Quién es el anticristo? I probably said it. ¿Quién es el anticristo? Who is the Antichrist? So again, they must have been talking at church about the Antichrist, or reading maybe even this verse. 1 John 2:18 says, "Children, this is the final hour. You have heard that the Antichrist," and again, I'm doing it in King James, "the Antichrist is coming, and now many Antichrists have come. From this we know that it is the final hour." And I asked my grandma that, and I remember we talked about it, and when we got home, I remember talking about it. But again, I know I was around 9 or 10 because it was coming from the old church, which the new church was built in the early 60s. And so this has been a question that I have had since I was 9 or 10. And of course, it hasn't been answered yet. I don't know. Nobody knows who the Antichrist is. Of course, we've had all kinds of people, from Nero, the first, they said Nero was the Antichrist. And they said that the Pope was the almost every president, Gorbachev, almost every major religious leader, secular leader, government leader, is Biden the Antichrist? Of course not. But look what it says. You have heard that the Antichrist is coming, and now many Antichrists have already come. So in John's day, there was already many Antichrists. Who is an Antichrist? An Antichrist is someone who declares that Yeshua has not come in the flesh, that the Messiah has not come in the flesh, and they are deceivers, John tells us. They are Antichrist. The word antes, is like anteojos. You've heard me say this before. These are my anteojos, my eyes instead of my eyes, these are my eyes. And so an Antichrist or anti-Messiah, as we're going to see, is someone who puts himself in place of Messiah. And today, all you have to go is go into the internet and put out false messiahs. And you'll see, not just in history, but today, there's about 5 men and 1 woman claiming that they are Yeshua, in the flesh, that they are Messiah. And follow me. And so many have been there, but there's going to be one anti-Messiah who's going to take the place of Yeshua the Messiah, and he will be known really as the beast. Then I saw a beast emerge from the sea. It had 7 heads, 10 horns, with a coronet on each of its 10 horns, and its heads were marked with blasphemous titles. We call this the beast of Revelation. Now, when we study the beast system, the beast is a man and a system, a government system, an economic system, a religious system. In fact, in the book of Revelation, one of the things that we're going to be looking at in further down the series is that there is a harlot, and she's riding the beast. And the harlot is a religious system, an end-time religious system that is in cahoots with the beast, with the economic political system. And so the beast is a man, what I would call the Antichrist par excellence, and it is also a government system, a one-world government, what we would call today the New World Order. Some people are calling it the Great Reset. There is a Great Reset coming, according to them, that's going to reset the world. And at some point it will. At some point it will reset the world to that system, to the Babylon. We began in the Shinar Valley. And from the Valley of Shinar, the end is going to come in Jerusalem, in the Valley of Jehoshaphat, where the final battle of Armageddon will take place. And so today, we are moving into this direction. We're moving into the direction of the beast system. What's going on in the world today, even not only with United States, China, Russia, the Middle Eastern countries, what happened in Afghanistan, but in the economies of the world, in even the medical situation with the COVID and the masking, all that is preparing us, preparing the world to the final 666 system. But what do beasts have to do with a nice Jewish holiday? What do these beasts and Antichrist have to do with this supposed Jewish holiday? Well, let's go into an introduction of what Hanukkah is. What is Hanukkah? And of course, Hanukkah, and it begins, the letter begins with a chet. That's not an H sound. That's a real strong CH sound, like in Bach. So to say Hanukkah, you got to say Hanukkah. Or, again, you can spell it all kinds of names. Chanukah, Hanukkah, Chachanukkah, and or, in fact, Dave was telling me that one of his granddaughters had spelled it a different name. Well, you can spell it the way you want. But this is the way it's spelled in Hebrew, achet, with a chatef kamatz, cha, and then that's a N, a nun, and this is a U sound, U, chanu, and then this is a k, a kaf, and again, that little dot in the middle, and I call it a belly button, makes it doubled, Chanukah. This is a kamatz, makes it a long ah sound, and again, the final hey is silent, Chanukah. And so that is the biblical way of saying it. And when we think of Hanukkah, and most of the time, again, we think of the Jewish holiday of Hanukkah and think that's the only Hanukkah there is. But Hanukkah is all over the scriptures. Hanukkah is a celebration of dedication, a setting apart of an object. If an object is to be used, that cup there by the menorah has been dedicated to Adonai. In other words, that's not for drinking Kool-Aid or drinking water or, I'll use a common cup. If I want to drink, I use a common cup. That is only set apart. That's been dedicated for use in doing the blessings. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri chagaf, and blessed are you, Adonai, King of the years. You've given us the fruit of the vine. And so it's specifically set apart for that. That's been dedicated. Not only objects, but persons. We dedicate our children to Adonai. In fact, next week we're having a dedication. We're going to have a Hanukkah. When you dedicate your baby, you Hanukkah your baby. You dedicate it. You set apart for special, for sacred use, that this little baby, in a sense, is Adonai's. Again, it's a consecration, an inauguration of something, and that's what it means. It is also a celebration of rededication. How many of you have rededicated your lives to Adonai after defilement? A lot of people, they backslide, and after they backslide, they want to get baptized again. Well, you don't need to be baptized again. You just need to re-Hanukkah yourself, rededicate yourself to Adonai. Have any of you ever backslid? And again, backsliding doesn't mean just going off into the world into bad stuff. It could just mean just not attending to the spiritual life that Adonai has called you to. Again, I like this from one of the ministries out there. Mistakes don't always have to be forever. Backslider, come home. Remember from Luke 15, the prodigal son, but when he came to himself, he says, I will go back. I will teshuvah. I will go back. That's what teshuvah means. To my father. And then when his father sees him, he has compassion, said, my son was lost, but is found. Hanukkah is about dedicating ourselves to Adonai. It's about dedicating to Adonai that which is his in the first place. But what happens when we fall away? We need to rededicate. And Hanukkah is a time of the year where rededication is also a theme. Now, why Hanukkah? Again, isn't it just a nice Jewish holiday? That's what it's made to be. That's what it has become. But Hanukkah is not a holiday, first of all. Hanukkah is not a holiday. The word holiday, actually, in the English, really comes from the word holy day or Yom Kodesh. A Yom Kodesh is a holy day. Again, the Mikra Kodesh in Scripture are called holy convocations. There is one weekly holiday, only one weekly holiday, and that's the Sabbath. That's today. Sunday is not a holy day. Shabbat is a holy day. And there are 7 yearly holy days in Torah. These are known as the Moedim, or in English, appointed days, appointed times. And there are 7 of them. Again, the Moedim, or what we call Feasts of Yahweh. Now remember, these are not Jewish feasts. A lot of people call them Jewish feasts. Or Feasts of Israel, many people call them. No, they are not Jewish feasts or Feasts of Israel. They are Feasts of Yahweh. And again, in Leviticus 23, the whole chapter deals with Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, weeks, trumpets, atonement, tabernacles. Again, Pesach, Hamatzah, Bekurim, Shavuot, also known as Pentecost, by the way. Weeks in Greek is Pentecost. Trumpets, Teruach, Kippurim, Sukkot. Hanukkah and Purim are not feasts of Yahweh, but celebrations of victory over the enemies of our faith, as we said a little while ago. And so these are the only feasts of Yahweh. It's important that we don't equal Hanukkah with any of the feasts of Yahweh. In fact, in many people's lives, many people, they would celebrate more Hanukkah than they would, for example, first fruits or weeks. Day of Atonement is a big one. And so tabernacles, but some people would put more emphasis on Hanukkah, which is only a Jewish, by the way, only Judah celebrates Hanukkah and Purim. Hanukkah and Purim are not feasts of Israel or celebrations of Israel. They have nothing to do with the other tribes. They happened when only Judah, the Jewish people, were captured. The importance of Hanukkah to the believer, and again, when I talk about the believer, I'm not just talking about the Messianic believer. Yeah, we've taken Torah for ourselves. We are following what Adonai says from Torah. But Torah is not just for Messianic and definitely not just for Jews. Torah is for the whole world. And Torah is for Christianity. If you're a Christian, regardless of what denomination, Torah is for you. The Sabbath is for you. But Hanukkah is for you too. Hanukkah is for every believer in Yeshua. Hanukkah is for every Christian. Why? Because Hanukkah is about truth versus error. One of the most important aspects of Hanukkah that you need to know, this is truth and this is error. We're going to see this is what the word says, this is what it doesn't say, or this is what it says not to do. This is what it says to do. This is the truth. And the Maccabees as we're going to see, and in the future, that last generation is going to have to decide, am I going to follow truth or am I going to follow error? The Maccabees gave their lives for truth, and many Jewish people sacrificed their lives for error and are gone. It's about honesty, being honest, and deception. There was honesty, and this is what it says. This is the truth. Let's be honest about it and follow it. No, but there's also deception. It's about the authentic versus the counterfeit. Here is Messiah, the authentic. Here is the anti-Messiah, the counterfeit. And the Maccabees saw the counterfeit, and they moved away from it. It's about the holy versus the common. Remember, the opposite of holy is not sin. The opposite of holy is not unrighteousness or bad stuff. The opposite of holy is common, the profane or the secular. The opposite of holy is secular. Now, we are called to live holy in a secular world. They could do it, we can't. Others can, I can't. It's about the clean versus the unclean, and we're going to see this in Hanukkah of the Maccabees, but we're also going to see this in the future. We're seeing it now in our lives. Those of you that are coming to a Messianic Hebraic lifestyle, you're seeing, I have to choose between what is clean and what is unclean. And these are choices that have to be made. It's about Messiah versus the anti-Messiah. Who is the real Messiah and who is going to be the anti-Messiah? We need a radical revolution within the body of Messiah. And by the way, when we say the word radical, every one of us must be radicals. What does the word radical mean? It means to the roots. A radical is someone that goes to the roots. Now, most people that call themselves radicals, or the media calls them radicals, they're not radicals, they're terrorists. A terrorist is not a radical unless they're going to the roots of terrorism and death and murder and chaos. True radicalism is going to the roots. And we need a radical revolution. What's a revolution? A coming back. We need to come back to the roots of our faith. And of course, the roots of our faith have to do with Torah. We need to teshuvah. We need to come back. We need to go to the beginning. And that beginning is always Torah. In fact, Hanukkah, in a very real sense, is about coming back to the beginning. Now, as I was reading the Torah scrolls earlier in our Parsha Vayetze, did you hear me say the word Hamakom or Makom several times? Interesting that today's parasha has to do with the place. When Yaakov arrived at the place, the word Hamakom means the place. And of course, the first place was Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden in English, in King James. And this was the place. This was the meeting place, the first original. This was, in a sense, the first gathering place, the first kehilah, the first ecclesia, the first synagogue, where Adam and Eve met with Adonai. In the cool of the day, they would meet, and Adonai taught our father Adam so much. This is the place. Hanukkah is about a place, the dedication of a place, the setting apart of a place. And this is what Adonai did in the first place, at the beginning, the foundations, where the world, it was one giant continent. This is before the flood. And that continent was called Eden. Eden. And in the midst of Eden, Adonai planted a garden. He planted a place there. And that place was to be the gathering place where he would meet with Adam and Chava. And it was there that he planted those two trees in the midst of the garden. And here's where Adonai would come and meet. And here is where we have the word Immanuel. You've heard that word, Immanuel. Elohim with us. Immanuel means Elohim with us. And so from Adam to the eternal kingdom, it's always been about his presence, the presence of Adonai. We must seek his presence every day. We must stand in his presence every day, as Adam and Abraham and many others came into his presence. Always remember this. We're not going to live with him forever in heaven. Everybody has this idea, when I die, we're going to heaven. No, we're not going to live in heaven forever. He is going to live with us in the new earth, in the new Jerusalem. Instead of us going to Elohim, Elohim is going to come to us. Instead of us living in heaven with him, he's going to live with us. Hallelujah. He's going to live with his children. We are not just going to live with our Father. More importantly, he's going to live with us. And Immanuel is the key to Scripture. And Hanukkah has something to do with that. The tabernacle, the temple of Solomon, the temple of Zerubbabel, the coming temples, and the eternal temple is always about the presence of Yahweh. In Exodus 2:5, we're going to see here soon, let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. You will make it according to the pattern for the dwelling and the design for its furnishings, which I shall show you. Adonai gave Moses a blueprint of the tabernacle, of the furnishings, and it is in that place that Adonai wanted to live with mankind. Excuse me. Live with mankind here on earth. Think of it. For 40 years, Yahweh lived among us. He was Immanuel, Elohim among us. For 40 years, he lived in a tent. After that, Solomon built him a temple, and Adonai lived in that temple. It is not as though Messiah had entered a man-made sanctuary, which was merely a model of the real one. He entered heaven itself. And so the tabernacle, the temples of Solomon's Zerubbabel, the coming temples, are just models after the real one in heaven. And the main parts of the temple, the holy of holies and the holy place and the outer court, that's the way it is in heaven. Interesting, when people die and go to heaven, have you ever noticed nobody ever sees the actual temple? They see bright lights, they see gates, they see all this kind of stuff. They see what old science fiction writers, Dante or Milton or any of these people have written, or science fiction stuff, or what people see on radio or hear on TV. But they don't see heaven itself. It's because they don't go there. Nobody goes there. The holiest and most sublime place, the Makom on earth, the Holy of Holies, the priest went there once a year, and with blood. Solomon's prayer at the Hanukkah of the first temple. Remember, he said, from all over the world you would face towards Jerusalem. And this is Hamakom, the place of Adonai's presence. Hanukkah has to do with the dedication of that place. Defilement, yes, defilement, but rededication. And we're going to see that throughout the history of what Hanukkah is. Hanukkah is about the holy place, Hamakom. Hamakom HaKodesh. It's about his presence, Immanuel, Immanuel. Of course, every one of us is defiled from the time of Adam. Every one of us has been defiled. And defilement brings his separation. When we are defiled, he separates from us because the holy and the profane cannot be together. But it's about his restoration of us, not our restoration. We don't restore ourselves. It is his restoration of us, and his restoration of us is only through one thing and one thing alone, the blood of Messiah, the blood of Yeshua that he gave as a sacrifice. For Elohim so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish, but have everlasting life. He restored us, and he continually restores us. He who says he has no sin is a liar and calling Elohim, but whoever confesses, whoever acknowledges his sin, then Elohim is faithful and just to forgive him his sins and cleanse him from all unrighteousness. This is Hanukkah. That's what Hanukkah is. Dedication, rededication, coming back to Adonai. But in the future, it's also about his holy place restored. There is going to be a restoration of his holy place. 2 more times in world history, his presence is returned to the holy place. Yes, there's going to be defilement from anti-Messiah. The anti-Messiah is going to defile that temple once again, another abomination, desolation. And Adonai is going to separate himself and bring judgment, the judgments of Revelation. But again, he's going to restore his kingdom. The final restoration. And then from there, eternity. So when we try to understand Hanukkah, there are many levels with their own secrets to Hanukkah. In this series, The Secrets of Hanukkah and the Coming Anti-Messiah, we're going to present at least 7 levels that I have found. There might be more levels, but I've only found 7 levels. And the 7 levels are first, the Hanukkah's level. That's what we're going to study today, just the Hanukkah's level. And then next week, we'll start with the prophetic level, the historic level, the legendary level, the messianic level, the moral level, and the eschatological level. The Hanukkah's level, we're going to go through all the Hanukkahs in history. We're just going to do a little survey of the Hanukkahs. Because again, I want to get away from the idea that there's only one Hanukkah. And that's the Maccabee Hanukkah, or that's the Jewish Christmas Hanukkah. We want to just get away from that and say, no, there's been many Hanukkahs. Then we're going to go into the prophetic level. We're really going to go into the book of Daniel. And in the book of Daniel, we're going to see that prophetically, Daniel, years before it happened, predicted the world system from his day in Babylon to the Medo-Persians, to the Grecians, the Romans, and to the final 10-nation confederacy, the 10 final 10 kings and the 7 heads and the crowns and all that you see in the book of Revelation. We're going to see that prophetically. But then what we're going to see is what Daniel and John prophesied historically actually took place in Antiochus, the Maccabees, and into what's going to be going on. We're going to look at the legendary level, the legends of Hanukkah, especially the legend of the why a Hanukkah, why an 8 and today a 9 candelabra. And we're going to see those legends and say that they never happened. They're not true. They were invented somewhere along the line. And then, fifthly, we're going to see the messianic level of Hanukkah. Did you know that the only place that Hanukkah is mentioned in the scriptures is in the book of John, in the New Testament? The only place where Hanukkah is mentioned. And we're going to see what Yeshua has to do with Hanukkah, because Yeshua is a vital part of Hanukkah. And then we're going to see the moral level. What does Hanukkah have to do morally with me, with my life? And the seventh, the eschatological. Eschatology is the study of last things, the last days. So we're going to see and bring it to the point of looking at this idea of Hanukkah as a look at what's happening today, no longer the last days. What's happening in the last hours right now? How does Hanukkah and the anti-Messiah have to do with what's happening in the world today? Again, the origin and meaning of Hanukkah, Hanukkah in Espanol. The Greek word, ekainia, is what's found in the book of John, and we're going to see that. Again, it's the word dedication. In about 200 before the Common Era, it was translated from the Hebrew into the Greek, what's called the Greek Septuagint, as ekainia, and it made its way as ekainia into the book of John. The Secrets of Hanukkah series is a last days seminar in 7 chapters, and we'll probably do those 7 chapters in the next 3 Sabbaths. So part 1 has to do with the Hanukkah's level, the Hanukkah's plural level. And again, the term Hanukkah means to dedicate. It's associated with anointing, getting oil, and anointing, which is the word Mashiach or Messiah. When you anoint something with oil, you Messiah it. You Messiah it. That's in Greek. The word Messiah, of course, is Christos or Christ. So that's why when someone is anointed with oil, it's called a christening. A christening. Messiah in, if you want to use the English word. And you dedicate it, and they anointed with oil the temple and the tabernacle. Everything that had to do with the temple and tabernacle were anointed, again, by Moses, by Solomon, Zerubbabel, and the Maccabees. So there are 3 dedications in the Torah and Tanakh. Again, the first Hanukkah, and we're going to be seeing this a lot. The first Hanukkah, the tabernacle by Moses. The second Hanukkah, the first temple by Solomon. The third Hanukkah, the second temple by Zerubbabel. So by now, we are getting into our minds the idea that there's not just one Hanukkah, there's many Hanukkahs. In fact, every time we dedicate a baby, that's a Hanukkah. Every time you backslide and rededicate your life, I want to be rededicated. I want to rededicate my life to Allah. You're re-Hanukkahing yourself, if we could use that word. Again, these dedications occurred on an 8-day platform that would become Sukkot. Interesting, and we're going to see this later on. One of the secrets that, again, even many Jewish people don't know, is that Hanukkah and Sukkot are brothers. Hanukkah and Sukkot are brothers, or Sukkot and Hanukkah are brothers. The Tabernacle of Moses was dedicated in what would become Sukkot. The first temple by Solomon, 8 days in Sukkot. The second temple by Zerubbabel, 8 days Sukkot. And one of the things that I always like to see, Adonai is very consistent. If he does something one time, he's going to do it all over again. He doesn't change. So we could look at the Hanukkahs to come in the same way. The word Hanukkah, again, can be used for any religious or secular setting. A Hanukkah isn't just religious, it could also be secular. Setting aside of an object, a person, or place for special use among them are. And again, in Scripture, the dedication of a house, they Hanukkah'd a house. How many have dedicated your houses? You dedicate your house to Adonai. I've been called in the past, can you dedicate my house? But you could dedicate your house. The dedication of vessels of silver and gold. The dedication of money. I dedicate this money. I Hanukkah this money unto the work of the kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar Hanukkah's an idol. He dedicates an idol, again, to their religious system. But the word Hanukkah, because it is not just a religious word, could also be, like, for example, what we would call Arlington Cemetery, the tomb of the unknown soldier. That land was dedicated, Gettysburg was dedicated for the soldiers, set apart for the soldiers that died there. And again, it's not a place, you don't go have a picnic at Arlington Cemetery. It's not appropriate because that's been dedicated for something to be of reverence. Even though it's secular, in a sense, it's still a reverent place. Now, the first Hanukkah in Numbers 7:84, this was the dedication or the Hanukkah of the altar in the day when it was anointed Mashiach, or we get the word Mashiach, by the princes of Israel. So the tabernacle was dedicated. Here's the holy place, and the Holy of Holies was here. The altar, the laver of water right there, and again, the courtyard. This was Hanukkah. This was dedicated, and so we would call this the first Hanukkah. As far as the temples, this was the first Hanukkah. When people talk about, remember the first Christmas, well, that's another story I don't want to get into, but the first Hanukkah is here. Solomon's temple, the tabernacle of Moses was getting old, and David says, why should I be living in a house of cedar when Adonai, he's living in an old shabby tent, because by that time it had gotten old. And so he says, I will build him a house. And of course, Adonai says to David, you won't build me a house because there's blood in your hands. Your son Solomon will build me a house. And so Solomon in 2 Chronicles, and in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication, the Hanukkah of the altar for 7 days, and the feast 7 days. Of course, it was the feast of Sukkot. And on the 8th day, which is Shemini Aseret, they made a solemn Kehillah, Kachal, assembly, ecclesia in the Greek, a church time, if you want to use the King James. And this is Solomon's temple. This was the first temple. And of course, the second Hanukkah, because it says there they dedicated the altar. It took them 7 days, and on the 8th day, they had the procession to dedicate the altar. That's the second Hanukkah on the first temple. Of course, in the book of Maccabees, now the book of Maccabees is not a scriptural book. It's a historic book. In fact, I'm going to encourage every one of you, if you could find a book of Maccabees, it's 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and it is 1st and 2nd Maccabees where we hear of the historical Hanukkah of the Maccabees. If you want to learn about the historical, not the legendary, because those legends are not in Maccabees. They're not in the historical compilation. But if you want to look, read the book of 1st and 2nd Maccabees. But in 2nd Maccabees, it says, it was also recorded how Solomon in his wisdom offered a sacrifice of the dedication or Hanukkah and completion of the sanctuary, as Moses had prayed to Yahweh, and fire had come down from heaven and burned up the sacrifice. So Solomon also prayed, and the fire from above consumed the burnt offerings. Solomon similarly observed the 8-day festival. Look at this is Solomon. This is way before the Maccabees. How long was Sukkot? 8 days. How long is the dedication of the Temple of Solomon? 8 days. So even in secular history, even in history outside of the Bible, we have the same idea that Hanukkah, or the dedication of the altar and temple, took 8 days, and it was the time of Sukkot. Now, the second temple of Solomon was destroyed. On the 9th of Av, Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians set fire to the temple. And this began the 70-year captivity of Judah. So, one of the things that we see here is when the Babylonians were outside, remember, Hanukkah is about the presence of Adonai. Emmanuel, Elohim with us. And he was with us in this temple. He was with us in this temple. And then our people fell away. Our people defiled themselves. In fact, they defiled themselves with Easter. Right here in front of this, at Easter time, they were celebrating a sunrise service with their backs against the temple. You never turn your back on the temple. Even today, from walking out of the Western Wall area, we walk backwards, because on the other side of the wall is where the Holy of Holies used to be. And even today, there's reverence for where the Holy of Holies used to be. And so you walk backwards. And they were celebrating an Easter day, an Ishtar day sunrise service. These were leaders of Israel. The women were baking cakes to Ishtar, to the Queen of Heaven. It says that they were making what today would be called hot cross buns. They were making them to the Queen of Heaven, Ishtar. And because of that, Adonai allowed the Babylonians. In fact, the word says that the kavod of Adonai lifted up from the temple when that abomination took place. The kavod lifted from the temple. The Spirit lifted from the temple and went towards the east, towards across the Kidron Valley, over the Mount of Olives, and then turned around towards the temple, and then turned around again and left. And as soon as the Ruach, the Kavod of Adonai, left, the Babylonians came in and destroyed it 586 years before Messiah. And they destroyed it. Defilement brought the destruction of the presence of Adonai. Of course, 70 years later, with Zerubbabel, Adonai allowed, after repentance, allowed us to return. And Zerubbabel builds the second temple. Now, the second temple wasn't as big and glorious as Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple was magnificent. The second temple was smaller, was more humble. Ezra 6:16 says, "And the children of Israel, the priests, the Levites, and the rest of the children of captivity kept the dedication, kept the Hanukkah of this house of Elohim with joy." So even when they came back, and when they kept the third Hanukkah, it was with joy. So the third Hanukkah was again with the second temple. Nehemiah says, "And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites out of all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to keep the dedication, the Hanukkah, with gladness, both with thanksgiving and with singing, cymbals and psalteries, and with harps." So Hanukkah is a time of celebration of dedication, celebration of the presence, the Emmanuel, being at that Hamakom, that place that Adonai wants us to be, that place where at that time he would meet with us. But of course, Antiochus in 167 desecrated the temple and set up a statue of Jupiter Zeus. The temple was desolate for 2 years until the Maccabees rededicated it. So Zerubbabel's temple, although it was not destroyed, a statue to Jupiter Zeus with Antiochus' face on it, by the way, was set up, and people were made to worship it. Whoever didn't worship and bow down and sacrifice, there was an altar of sacrifice set up over here. And all the scrolls, the Torah scrolls, were burnt. Circumcision was forbidden. And this abomination of desolation, this statue, again, this is not just about Antiochus. We're going to see the coming anti-Messiah, the coming Antiochus, if you will, of our future. If we're in the last hours, then this is going to be happening, maybe not to our generation, but to the next several generations. It will occur. So we need, again, not be fearful, but prepare. Prepare our kids. The second temple was reinstated. The statue was torn down. The first altar was broken. Pieces were broken. And this is so important, right? This thing right here. The Maccabees reinstated the temple. They cleansed it. It had been defiled. Pig's blood, and which was the sacrificed pigs, was all over the temple, so they had to clean it. But because a pig had been sacrificed here, the Maccabees said, "This is holy, a holy altar. It's been dedicated. It's been set apart. It's been Hanukkah. But the blood of a pig has been on it. So what do? They had a dilemma. They couldn't just throw the stones away because they were holy stones, but they couldn't keep them because they were defiled. So what they decided to do was get the stones and put them in a certain place on the Temple Mount. So the Temple Mount was a flat square, 500 by 500 meters square, and in one corner they deposited the stones of the altar. There was never no trees. When you see the Temple Mount today, you see trees and shrubs. That's modern. That's Muslim. But in biblical times, the Temple Mount was just a square, marble square, with no trees, no nothing, because they didn't want bugs or pigeons or anything like that in this holy area. And so they deposited these stones, and they rebuilt an altar. The rededicated altar was Hanukkah. So this second temple reinstated was the fourth Hanukkah. So the fourth Hanukkah, the altar was destroyed, rebuilt, and so we have a new altar, which means another Hanukkah. So this is the Hanukkah that everybody today points to. But it was the fourth Hanukkah, not the first, the fourth Hanukkah. And then the second temple, around 19 to 10 before the Common Era, although in Yeshua's time, they were still working on building Herod's temple, the outward area. But between 19 and 10, what Herod did is he got Zerubbabel's temple, which the Maccabees had rededicated after the defilement, and he built this temple on top of that temple, and then he had the priests dismantle the little one of Zerubbabel, and they took that one out. And the Zerubbabel's, the Maccabean altar was right there. And so Herod's temple is also called the second temple. This one's also called the second temple, although this one should have probably been called the third temple, but this one was still called the second temple. And of course, this one was destroyed in 70 of the Common Era by Titus, the Roman prince, according to Daniel and Yeshua's prophetic words. So this one was also destroyed and burnt. But there are two more Hanukkahs to go. Two more Hanukkahs to go. The fifth Hanukkah of the third temple before the second coming of Messiah. And then the sixth Hanukkah of the fourth temple, what we call Ezekiel's temple, after the second coming of Messiah in the millennium. And so we're going to see these two. Here's the fifth Hanukkah, the third temple. That's just some artist conception. And the fifth Hanukkah will occur at the beginning of the 70th week of Daniel, probably by the anti-Messiah. It will function for 3.5 years. The third temple that's coming is they're going to, of course, have a Hanukkah for it, but it'll only function for 3.5 years until Daniel 9:27 says he, talking about anti-Messiah, the beast, will put a stop to sacrifice and oblation, and on the wing of the temple will be the appalling abomination. Now Yeshua says, when you therefore see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. That tells you that by Yeshua's time, any of the other destruction of the temple is not what Daniel meant, but a coming one. And because nothing like that has happened, then we know it's still future. in 2 Thessalonians 2:4. And he, talking about the lost one, the man of sin, we're going to meet Mr. Antichrist later on. He, as Elohim, sits in the temple of Yahweh, showing himself that he is Elohim. So this temple of Daniel 9:27, Matthew 24:15, and 2 Thessalonians 2:4 has not been built yet. Has not been built yet. Today, there's what we call third temple fervor. Today, a group calling themselves the Temple Mount Faithful, the Temple Institute. You go to Jerusalem, there on the Jewish quarter, there is the Temple Institute where you could go see the menorah that they have for the third temple. You could go see the clothing. In fact, Begad Ivrit from Israel made me an actual Levites, Talit and Levites. They came and they measured me and made me Levites clothing that are going to be used for the third temple. Everybody's looking for the red heifer. I don't know if you've seen, every so often it comes out in the news that the red heifer has been found. But then under examination, there's a gray hair or there's a black hair. They can't find a perfect red heifer. And the stones for the altar, they went to the Dead Sea, and under the Dead Sea, they dug to get virgin stones that nobody has touched, and they have them sealed and wrapped, ready for that. And again, every year, every so often, every Feast of Tabernacles, the Temple Mount faithful get the cornerstone, and they move it, and they move it, and getting closer and closer. But here is someone's third temple imposed on the background of Jerusalem, the new city of Jerusalem. And so everybody's thinking about the third temple. And pretty soon, in fact, this idea that our former President Trump, probably the best president, along with President Reagan, Washington, and some of those guys, but he brought the embassy to Jerusalem, and people said, does that mean that they're going to start building the temple? Is Trump going to start building the temple? Well, there was no thought of building the third temple, but in popular culture today, there's third temple fervor. And everybody's always asking, when are they going to build a third temple? And again, this third temple, regardless of how it is probably going to be built by the anti-Messiah. By the way, in reference to the temple, many of you have been also maybe studying or seeing in the news that what we call the Temple Mount, this picture right there is imposed on the current Temple Mount, which has the Dome of the Rock and the Alaska Mosque on it. But many people today are saying that that's not the true temple site. And many people are looking at a site down on the city of David. And the problem we're having here is, if you want to build that temple right there, that's where the Dome of the Rock is. So technically, since Islam controls the Temple Mount, where the Jerusalem of Yeshua's day, the temple was, and from Solomon and to Herod's day was there, you can't have both at the same place. So now a group of Jewish and Christian scholars are saying, well, we don't need to worry about that because the real temple was down south in the city of David. Now, I don't follow that model. I don't follow that theory. I still believe it was right here. But when that occurs, it's going to take someone like the anti-Messiah, a man of peace. Remember, the anti-Messiah is not going to be a beast at the beginning. He's going to come like a lion. And then he's going to turn into a beast. He's going to be a man of peace. Then he'll become a man of terror and war. And so one of the things that'll happen is politically something's going to happen. Sometimes I say, I thank Adonai for the dome over Jerusalem. You've heard about the dome and all the rockets coming in. There's a dome over Jerusalem. And when the rockets come in, it's almost like they're shut down. Sometimes I say, maybe one day that if a rocket's coming in, one day that dome shouldn't work and boom, get rid of everything that is there. So again, the temple could be built and then have it come back again, protect Jerusalem. But third temple fervor is there today. Now, Ezekiel's temple is the fourth temple. Now, here's where we are getting into confusion because people are thinking, both Christians and Jews and even some Messianics are thinking that the temple that they're preparing for is Ezekiel's temple, and that's not true. Ezekiel's temple is going to be the fourth temple. This is going to be the temple that Yeshua builds. Yeshua is going to build Ezekiel's temple. And Yeshua is going to be the high priest. So the third temple is what I call the Antichrist Temple. Not that it's his temple, it's just that he's the builder. Just like Herod's temple was not the temple where Herod was worshipped. He was the builder. And so the Antichrist, whoever that man's going to be, is going to build the third temple. We are not preparing to build Ezekiel's temple now because the only one that can build Ezekiel's temple is Yeshua the Messiah. And at the millennium, this is the fourth temple. So there is going, again, to be a sixth Hanukkah. And the sixth Hanukkah is going to be the Hanukkah of Ezekiel's temple, or the fourth temple. And again, the kavod of Adonai comes in at the dedication also. But we know that there's also going to be a seventh temple. And in the book of Revelation 21:22 says, I could not see any temple in the city, the New Jerusalem, since Yahweh Elohim Almighty and the Lamb were themselves the temple. So the eternal temple is going to be Yahweh Elohim and the Lamb. And what do you do with the temple? Hamakom, the place, his presence. So think of it. In the eternal temple, we are going to be in the new Jerusalem, and we are going to be in the Hamakom, in the place of his presence. It's going to be all about Emmanuel, Elohim with us. Remember, it's not us with him, it's he with us. Elohim with us, Emmanuel, forever and ever and ever. So an overview of the Hanukkahs. The first Hanukkah was the temple, the tabernacle of Moses. The second Hanukkah was the first temple of Solomon. The third Hanukkah was the second temple of Zerubbabel. The fourth Hanukkah was the second temple Maccabean. Remember, it had been defiled, so they had to re-Hanukkah it. And again, there was some Herodian additions, but if someone finds this, please let me know. But I don't have any, I've tried to research this, but where another altar was built by Herod, and then another Hanukkah dedicated. So there might even be the Herodian additions Hanukkah might be a fifth Hanukkah. But again, I haven't found anything. Of course, the fifth Hanukkah is going to be the third temple. We don't know who's going to build it. Definitely it's going to be Anti-Messiah is going to take his place, like it says in Daniel, Matthew, and 2 Thessalonians, and Revelation 13 with the statue that speaks the 666. That's going to be part of the fifth Hanukkah, third temple. And then there's a sixth Hanukkah, which is the fourth temple of Messiah Yeshua. That's Ezekiel's. And then a seventh Hanukkah, the fifth temple, which is going to be Yahweh and the Lamb themselves. So it's interesting when I started studying about Hanukkah many years ago, and I was first introduced to it. I, like everyone that becomes a believer, thought that there was only one Hanukkah, and that one Hanukkah had to do with oil and a miracle of the oil and the menorah and latkes and all that kind of stuff, until I found out, wait a second. I was reading the scriptures in Hebrew, and it came up with Solomon about the word Hanukkah. I said, Hanukkah. So I started researching. I said, oh, is it Hanukkah's all over the Tanakh? And it's in the only time that Hanukkah in the Bible, as far as the Feast of Dedication, is in the New Testament. And so next week we will start with the secrets of Hanukkah, chapter 2, the prophetic level. But as we close here today, we said that Hanukkah was about dedication, about dedicating our lives to Him. And I still remember the day that I was when I was in the military, I was involved in an incident where I was injured and almost died. And my whole face was, and all these teeth are fake, they're broken off. And as I was recovering and thinking to myself, I could have died. I'd be at the bottom of the ocean outside of Vladivostok, Russia. And I could have died. And I still remember the day. And I remember the words. And I could even take you to that place, although that ship is sunk. But I could have taken you to the very place where I said, Adonai, I dedicate my life to you. I dedicate my life to you. And from that time on, Adonai answered that prayer, and I started teaching. Again, I was only 19 years old. And from that time on, I started teaching. Adonai heard my prayer. Today, let's go ahead and stand. And you might say, well, I've given my life to Messiah. I've given my life to Yeshua. I'm born again. But are you dedicated? Have you dedicated your life to Messiah? Are you Hanukkah? Have you been Hanukkah? Will you Hanukkah yourself today? Maybe you've been backslidden. And again, I'm not talking that you're out in the world drinking and all kinds of doing bad stuff. If you are, you definitely need to dedicate your life to Messiah, to his Torah. But you might just be secular in so many ways. Remember, others may, I can't. Yeah, even other Christians, other believers could do that. Yeah, they could. And we're not talking about, well, they could eat bacon, I can't. But other things, they could go out partying, I can't. They could do those things, I can't. Adonai, today, I dedicate my life to you. Is that in your heart? Adonai, I dedicate my life to you. Remember, a dedicated life. Yeah, you could be saved, but undedicated. Unhanukkah'd. In this Hanukkah season, Hanukkah your life. Not just your things. It's not just a Jewish holiday. Dedicate your money, your resources, everything to Adonai. And Father, it is my prayer that every one of us could rededicate or even dedicate. If someone here has not dedicated their life, that they could even be born again today, Father, by coming to you. I give you honor and glory in the name of Yeshua. Yevrechecha Yahweh vayishmerecha. Air Yahweh panavelecha vichunecha. Asa Yahweh panavelecha vayasem lecha shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.